April 13, 1982, the day Laker Airways filed for bankruptcy, leaving 8,000 employees without a paycheck and a continent's first low-fare empire in ashes. It was a shock that rippled through the aviation world, because just 12 years earlier Sir Freddie Laker had turned the idea of cheap, no frills, flying from a daring gamble into a global phenomenon. In 1966, a modest, single-aircraft operation called Laker Airways began life out of a small office in Kent, England. Freddie Laker, a charismatic former British Overseas Airways Corporation pilot, believed that air travel should be a right for the many, not a luxury for the few. He purchased a second-hand Lockheed Constellation and launched charter flights to Mediterranean holiday spots, offering prices that undercut the established flag carriers. The formula was simple: high-frequency routes, a single class of service, and fares that were a fraction of what airlines like Boke or B charged. The public responded with enthusiasm, and within a few years the airline's fleet grew to include the sleek, jet-powered Boeing 707 that could whisk vacationers from London to Ibiza in under 3 hours. The turning point came in 1977, when Laker unveiled SkyTrain, the world's first truly low-cost, no-reservation, point-to-point service. On a crisp October morning, a Boeing 707 roared down the runway at London Gatwick, heading for New York's John F. Kennedy Airport. The ticket price, a jaw-dropping £99, barely enough to cover a night's accommodation in London. The flight was marketed as the world's cheapest transatlantic service and was sold through a revolutionary no-frills model: no meals, no assigned seats, and no ticket agents to collect commissions. In the first year, SkyTrain carried more than 600,000 passengers, forcing the industry to reckon with a new reality: that mass markets could be tapped by slashing prices and cutting out the excesses of traditional service. Yet, behind the glossy advertisements and packed cabins, warning signs began to emerge. Laker's rapid expansion was financed almost entirely by debt. The airline's balance sheet was a precarious house of cards, built on a combination of high-interest loans, lease agreements, and a constant need for fresh capital to purchase newer, more fuel-efficient aircraft. The oil crises of 1973 and 1979 had already taught the industry that fuel price volatility could erode profit margins. But Laker's business model left little room for error. Every dollar saved on ticket prices had to be recouped through sheer volume, and any dip in demand threatened to tip the scales. Compounding the financial strain was a series of aggressive legal battles with the very giants Laker had forced to lower their fares. British Airways, feeling the heat of SkyTrain's low-cost transatlantic challenge, sued Laker for alleged anti-competitive practices, claiming that the airline's no-reservation system violated the International Air Services Transit Agreement. The litigation dragged on for years, draining legal resources and creating uncertainty among investors. At the same time, the U.S. Department of Transportation began scrutinizing Laker's operations, questioning whether the airline's pricing tactics constituted unfair competition against U.S. carriers. These regulatory pressures not only slowed expansion plans but also signaled to lenders that the airline's future was anything but secure. By early 1982, the cracks became impossible to ignore. Fuel prices had spiked again, and a mild recession in the United Kingdom reduced discretionary spending on holidays. Laker's cash flow dwindled, and the airline struggled to meet lease payments on its aging 707 fleet. In a desperate bid to stay afloat, the company attempted to negotiate a rescue package with a consortium of banks, but the banks, wary of the ongoing lawsuits and the airline's mounting debts, demanded collateral that Laker simply did not possess. On the night of April 13, the board convened in a stark, fluorescent-lit conference room at Gatwick and voted to file for bankruptcy protection. Within hours, the news broke across the globe. The pioneer of low-cost air travel had collapsed. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. Hundreds of passengers found themselves stranded at airports around the world, clutching tickets that had promised a cheap seat across the Atlantic. The British government, under pressure to protect consumers, arranged emergency repatriation flights, but the logistical nightmare underscored how unprepared the industry was for a low-fare carrier's sudden disappearance. Employees received termination notices with little severance, and the airline's once gleaming brand was reduced to headlines of bankruptcy court filings. Laker's fall, however, sowed seeds that would blossom into the modern low-cost carriers we know today. The SkyTrain experiment proved that the transatlantic market could sustain sub-economy pricing, a lesson that later airlines such as Virgin Atlantic and, more dramatically, the European budget giants Ryanair and EasyJet would adopt and refine. The legal battles forced regulators to rethink how competition was defined in an era when traditional carriers were no longer the only players. In the United States, the Department of Transportation eventually softened its stance, allowing low-cost startups like Southwest to expand beyond domestic routes. In essence, Laker's demise became a case study in both the possibilities and perils of disruptive business models. Freddie Laker himself never fully recovered financially, but his legacy endured. He continued to champion the cause of affordable air travel, speaking at conferences and lobbying for deregulation. In 1992, a decade after his airline's collapse, the UK government finally passed the Air Passenger Rights Regulations, granting consumers protections that were, in part, inspired by the chaos of the 1982 bankruptcy. Subscribe to The Collapse for more stories like this.